Well, Seattle's transportation battles, they just continue. I don't know about you, but I can't understand hardly anything that's going on now. So we're going to go to the expert, John Niles, transportation expert tonight on public exposure. John, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
It's been a few years.
It has, sir.
And you know what? I think we're probably going to talk about some of the same things we talked about a few years ago.
Fine to me. That goes on. Transportation just stays there. Very important.
Before we go on too much, your consulting practice is through your company, Global Telematics.
That's right.
And in addition to transportation, you kind of have a, what exactly do you do?
Well, we work where technology and transportation come together. For example, I'm working with an inventor who has a new idea for a technology that will improve transportation. So
we like him already.
Exactly, as I do. I try to foster innovation where I can. I'm also now involved with a new organization called the Center for Advanced Transportation Solutions. I'm doing that with Steve Marshall. That's a nonprofit. We've registered it, and we're going to focus on issues around both public transit and the new forms of technology, including telematics, which means computers and telecommunications together, helps transportation, and electric vehicles, of course, which is really the coming thing in transportation for cars.
You know, last year, right where you're sitting right now, we had a Tesla come in here, one of the Tesla sports cars.
Excellent. I've seen that vehicle, and you're going to see more and more electric vehicles around. It's really a national priority to have millions and millions of them as fast as people will buy them, and there are incentives now to have people buy them. It's going to be an important development.
Okay, well, let's get to what we have right here. Just out today, the state will not file an appeal to stop the tunnel vote. That's right here in Seattle. And coming out of the Seattle Times, and they say that the vote is shaping up as a citizen advisory on Highway 99 as a whole. What does that mean?
Well, I think that's fair. I mean, what we're talking about here with this project of our state government is the replacement of Highway 99. I mean, before there was I-5, there was Highway 99. They still call it that in Canada, by the way, when you cross the border from I-5. It's an important north-south road. It still is. And what they're talking about is how that highway moves through downtown Seattle. It's really has always been what you call a CBD bypass tunnel, or it's been a viaduct, of course, but it's a road that gets you through there. I've used it. You've probably used it. It's a great alternative to I-5. And now the viaduct has reasons for coming down related to the way our city looks. That seems to be a consensus. Certainly the people who look at it, as opposed to the people who ride on it, want to see it go down.
It's ugly, so let's spend $1 billion to make it pretty.
Those of us who ride on it, frankly, think it's a pretty good deal, and some of us are a bit disappointed that the replacement, and I think that's the source of some of the criticism, isn't going to carry as many cars as the present one. And of course we have another side, the people who are behind this referendum one, who think we can live without it. Well, which is an interesting idea.
Let's get into what we're going to be voting on, because I'm not certain what there is. There's two things. There's referendum 1 and Initiative 101, and Referendum 1 is the only thing that's on the ballot. Is that right?
That's the only one that's going to be on the ballot August 16th. The other one is going to court in July, actually, now, and we won't hear about it till later.
Just for the public's standpoint, that first one, the Initiative 101, is the Seattle Citizens Against the Tunnel, and we'll find out more in July.
Right.
The Referendum 1 is...
I want to make it clear, they are still active. They haven't gone away. They're active, but they're delayed.
Oh, I see. And so Referendum 1, Protect Seattle Now, is the next one. And I'm completely confused. It says reject Referendum 1, reject the tunnel. What am I voting on when I vote?
Well, if you don't like the tunnel, the vote is to reject, that's for sure. That's just the way it turns out. The judge went through a legal process after collecting all the signatures, and it turns out there was a bit of language there that the judge thought was fair to put on the ballot. And the particular language involves the process by which the city council decides that what the environmental process says is okay. And I won't go into why reject means no tunnel, but it is kind of good that it lines up with how you feel about the tunnel. So if you like the tunnel, it's yes, and if you don't like it, it's reject. Okay,
so let's say that the no vote wins.
Right.
Let's say it gets 60%. You know, a huge majority vote no on the tunnel. What does that mean?
Well, it certainly is a signal from the citizens of Seattle that they're unhappy with the tunnel. It's not necessarily a signal of what to do about that, because it turns out that all the people who would like to see the viaduct replaced, by and large, are going to be voting to reject as well. It's actually a complicated situation, unfortunately. We have two reasons not to like the tunnel. One is you would rather see the viaduct there, and the other is you'd rather that we
have a park.
Have a park, disperse the cars to the street.
To the parking lots,
well,
because that's what it would be. It would be the Highway 99 parking lot. Let's actually go to some of the specifics from the reject referendum. Number one, they say that there is new information about the tunnel, reveals it simply won't work. And the first point that they make is that it's unaffordable. They say funding for the tunnel's base budget without expected overruns is short by $700 million. Is that right?
Well, I think that's as I recall, that's the number that they need to come up with through tolling. I mean, tolling is an important part of this particular project, which is kind of an interesting thing, because naturally the higher you set the toll, the less people will use it. There's a supply demand. There's the free market when it comes to tolls. So a lot of the concerns about the finances, in fact, has to do with how much you're going to be able to get out of the tolls.
I've driven on toll roads back east a lot, and
Sure.
they're all, frankly, pretty inexpensive.
Yeah, and I think the numbers they're looking at, and I'm not sure that it's all figured out, but they're looking at numbers like $4 and $5 to go through that tunnel.
I saw some estimates as high as $7 to $9.
Yeah, and it's a tricky process, because you want to set a toll that people will embrace and use. At the same time, you don't want people to necessarily avoid it. It turns out one of the big differences with the plan of the government is all of the entrances and exits of the present State Route 99, including the viaduct, are not there. It actually is not a one-for-one replacement. I mean, it is a way to connect Aurora on the north side of downtown with SR 99. I don't think they call it Aurora down there anymore. Down in Soto, it does connect it. And with the same number of lanes that are in the Battery Street Tunnel, which is going to be gone. They'll get rid of that because this tunnel replaces that. But all of the traffic that comes from northwest Seattle, which now gets aboard the viaduct and is a large part of a significant part of the 100,000 or more cars a day that are on that, they are going to go on the surface. I mean, we kind of have a surface option. And similarly, the people from West Seattle are not going to have the tunnel or viaduct. It's not the same thing. They're going to have to go on the surface to get into downtown from that direction. So it's a change of the concept of what SR 99 means.
So I get it. We just don't want people to go downtown anymore. Is that it?
Well, I think the thought of a lot of referendum one supporters who would support the so-called surface option are thinking that it's about transit, it's about working on I-5 a bit, it's about dispersing traffic. And I will tell you, as a transportation professional, that people will adapt. I mean, there's already been a study by the University of Washington done that, in fact, makes out the so-called gridlock scenario to be less likely to happen, because frankly, people will move. I mean, if you live in West Seattle and have a job in North Seattle and use the viaduct every day to do it, I mean, you may move your house or move your job once this deal gets going. So behavior will change.
Let's go to the next point of Reject Referendum 1, and it is that it's harder to get around. It will only be useful for about a third of the viaduct users. Is that right?
That's kind of an interesting argument. Again, it works kind of for both sides, doesn't it? And again, I think it bears directly on the entrances and exits of the new tunnel. I mean, basically, it kind of begins where the Battery Street Tunnel goes. But for example, coming from the Ballard area, I mean, I enter it, by the Art Institute there, and on those other ramps, and those are going away. I mean, for that trip, I'm going to be down on the surface. So yeah, and it's not even particularly useful unless I cut up through the Queen Anne neighborhood on Mercer and find my way that way. It really changes patterns. There's no question about it. And you know, we don't know for sure how it's all going to work out. But the state says, no, this is the best solution. Others say it isn't.
Wow, you know what you described sounds like a ski slope to me, where you've got you know, you've got the overhead. Essentially, it's a railway going up to the top of the slope, or you've got the T-bar, which is down below.
That's right.
For the youngers.
It's
and
different.
That's it.
It's very much different.
Let's go to the next point that they made. And the next point is it worsens traffic. 70,000 cars each day are expected to flood Pioneer Square.
Yeah, this is what the opponents are saying, right?
Well, this is what Protect Seattle Now says, and I find the whole thing, it's confusing. I don't understand their arguments. And they want to reject referendum 1. And this is right off their website. So let's just.
That's right. Well, I think there's some concern about spending a lot of money and then ending up with a facility that, as they say, moves about as many cars as the Ballard Bridge. I mean, that turns out to be kind of the go line, the money line that's being used. I think it was used by the mayor for the first time. It's kind of an interesting point. It basically says, well, you have a facility that works one way now, and now you're going to spend a whole lot of money on a tunnel that has you know, some risks in the financial side and some risks on the construction side. I don't think anybody would deny that. And at the end of the day, you end up with something that, frankly, doesn't carry as many cars as before. I think the reject side might say, let's get smarter and figure something else out, one way or the other. Now is a good time to really do something different. I have to tell you, though, the state, I think it's fair to say that the state of Washington thinks that this result isn't going to change what they're going to do. I mean, I think they believe that the way they have the process working with the environmental impact statement and the majority on the city council, and perhaps some court intervention later, not now. I think they're thinking they're going to be able to pull this off. So I think opponents on both sides, when I say the two reasons to oppose it, have their own strategies in mind.
Okay, so basically it is damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, and full speed is certainly a relative term.
Well, that's
here.
the state position, and they've got contracts signed, vendors selected, and you know, they're talking openly about how much money is going to be, I would call it sunk, unusable if this thing were in fact stopped.
Let's go to the next reason for rejecting. This is from the referendum. They say it includes no transit. We'll get back to that one. Back last year, I believe it was in October 2010, the Seattle Times wrote this article, and it was Mike Lindblom wrote it. The tunnel would mean more traffic on the waterfront. So if there's some controversy, they're putting it right up front. Let's go to the first quote. They say the $2 billion, 1.7 mile Highway 99 tunnel creates a dilemma. How to move traffic without ramps, just like what you're talking about, leading to downtown and the Inner Bay, which will be about half, which is about half the viaduct users today. And then their next quote is, overall, the tunnel is expected to carry at least 1/3 fewer vehicles than the viaduct. So John, here's what we're going to do. I want you to think about it. We're going to take a very short break, and then we'll be right back with this point. We're very fortunate tonight right here on Public Exposure to have John Niles with us. He's with Global Telematics, and he is a transportation expert, merging transportation as well as technology together to try to come up with some transportation solutions. And boy, oh boy, do we need transportation solutions around here. If you have questions, go to the website globaltelematics.com. Okay. The tunnel itself. I mean, if we have this nice enclosed tunnel, which we all have driven in tunnels before,
right?
We're going to have less capacity,
right?
And 1/3 fewer vehicles actually using it. Is that right?
That's right, by their own numbers. And it has a lot to do with, as I say, the design. I mean, there are not as many ways to get into that tunnel as there are to get onto that viaduct. There is no doubt that some of the traffic that would now use the viaduct is not going to use the tunnel. That's for two reasons. One is because of the design. We've talked about that. The ramps are different. And the other is because of the tolls. There are some people who really, especially, well, for a variety of reasons, do not like to pay a $4, $5, $6 toll. So yeah, the state's own modeling shows that. I think what they're thinking, if I may put myself in their shoes, is that in peak period in particular, and with critical commercial trips, the numbers all work. I mean, you don't know that for sure. I mean, modeling is, about computers and talking about the future and using statistics, and it's never comes out exactly like you think. But I think the theory is that in particular things will shake out and it will work well enough. And there, a lot of the information here is, well, it's really the only option we've got. I mean, it's a little bit. And believe me, they thought about it long and hard to come up with this.
And thinking about it and putting it in theory, I'm sure they're really smart people and all.
Right.
And that's great. But I live in that area. I mean, I live in the area of Beacon Hill,
yep.
And then there are people who are tied in with the production here who live and or work around the Harbor Island area.
Sure.
And the reality is that there are trucks that are operated by independents that are flying out of the port. And here's kind of the situation. This picture is one. Let's go to the next picture, because this is of a truck driver right there who is essentially living in a tent. And if they're not paying enough for this person to be able to get a house, and he's an independent, he's going to have to drive as fast as he can to get from point A to point B so he gets paid more. That's what we've seen. There was a big article about just like that in the Seattle, I think,
right.
PI maybe 10 years ago.
Sure.
And I've seen it myself. And so now, instead of being on the viaduct, they're going to be in a tunnel with me? I don't think so.
And don't forget, Stan, that a lot of the thinking, and I got this directly talking to the Port of Seattle, some transportation officials there some time ago, that the viaduct to them is a way of keeping a lot of the civilian non-truck traffic out of their way. I mean,
Would you say that again?
It's to keep the non-truck traffic, it's to keep the cars, so to speak, out of the way of their truck drivers. I mean, a lot of for example, from the manufacturing district along the ship canal and the fisherman's terminal and all that, those trucks are going to use the waterfront. I mean, by and large, they're not. It isn't like that every truck is going to find the tunnel. What's the hope is that enough people in cars and who aren't doing business will use it. So it's a little bit about keeping the rest of us out of the way. I want to be clear. That's a lot of the theory behind the tunnel, and it's important to understand.
So let's say that there is the rejection of the tunnel idea, and so the only thing left is the surface option. Where are those trucks going to go? Pioneer Square?
Well, then they'd be on the surface for sure. I mean, I think the one option that perhaps isn't being considered, and I sort of puzzle through how to make this work, and I think that there probably are ways to increase volumes on the waterfront. Let's say there's no viaduct and no tunnel. I have a feeling that the state wants an SR 99. I mean, one could imagine the Battery Street Tunnel staying in place. One could imagine doing something on the surface, perhaps like 15th Northwest. You have some underpasses. You have a pretty wide, fast-moving road there, some kind of lidding. I mean, I think it's not out of the question that our state could become quite creative about how to do a waterfront road that still allowed access to the waterfront and yet kept traffic moving at the same time. I mean that's really, it's what you'd have to call the compromise position if for some reason this tunnel goes down as a result of this vote, and then perhaps another vote in November on this initiative.
101.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to some numbers.
Sure.
The Alaskan Way viaduct trips. First off, where did these numbers come from?
These are from the modeling done by the state of Washington.
Okay, so this is current information. Okay, let's go to the click because we bring it up. So right now we've got.
So I mean, 100,000 is the number. You see a big
111,000.
You see a big six-digit number there, and I've looked at that year after year after year. All this talk about traffic going down. There's a little bit of that. Not on that viaduct. I mean, that 100,000 number plus is held for years.
All right, and so there it is.
Strong number.
At 111,000
Yep.
actually. Okay, so let's go to the next one. This is Alaskan Way tunnel trips. Tunnel trips. Let's go to the click because you bring it up, and these are estimates again by the state of Washington.
Absolutely.
And so immediately there is a reduction even in their own estimate.
Absolutely, and I commented on that. I mean, they say we're building a replacement for SR 99, and all you can say is it doesn't carry the same amount of traffic. I mean, some of the traffic that now is on that portion of SR 99 on the waterfront is load shedded, if you want, load shedded to the city of Seattle. And I frankly haven't heard a lot of explanations of how that works and why that works. What's interesting is all of the comments like that on the environmental impact statement, and there are hundreds and hundreds of them, are going to be published in July, the reaction. And all the objectors to the tunnel have 30 days, as it turns out, before a record of decision is issued to file various objections based on the environmental analysis. The state has been working on their answers for months and months and months, but the people who want something different have about 30 days to make a case, frankly, to the Secretary of Transportation of the USA, and they have to be answered, those objections. Just the way it works. It's the law. It's called NEPA.
Oh.
National Environmental Policy Act.
Oh, okay. And so that's going to take a while, that's for sure.
Maybe. The state timeline says, well, we'll get through that real fast. I don't know. I mean, they have a number of lawyers and very smart people working on that, and they're ready to go. They're ready to build a tunnel.
This is an old argument, but you've kind of in a sort of a way have brought it up, and this is the compromise position. And I really don't understand why this isn't considered more. Let's actually go to this next picture. This is of the Magnolia Bridge, the retrofit, which you can see from a distance. And then here it is.
After the earthquake they did that, right? Yeah.
And I mean, I know that the Magnolia Bridge, of course, doesn't have the same traffic, but it's much higher, and it works.
Yeah.
And I mean, I hate to put it this way, but it works for wealthy people. Why can't it work for us poor folks that live in Beacon Hill?
There are a number of engineers who pushed very hard for that idea on the viaduct. And a couple of considerations. Number one, there are a lot of people who don't want the viaduct. And all you do is look at the viaduct and you think it wrecks the waterfront. You don't care about any of this. You want the viaduct gone. For those who think the capacity is very, very important, the state looked at those kinds of ways of bracing it up and reinforcing it. And they frankly said, what they said, I don't know if it's frankly or not, it costs too much money. It doesn't really solve the problem for the length of time we want to solve the problem. It was viewed as a very temporary solution. There are engineers to this day who will dispute that, but that is just the way it's turned out. And that whole approach was evaluated in earlier versions of the EIS, and I suspect that again objections may come up when the latest environmental impact statement is issued in July or August or whenever.
A few years ago, we had an engineer right here on the show who talked about this solution, and he talked about specifics with regard to numbers, and it was essentially a very small fraction of the cost.
I know.
And in today's world, we have to take costs into account, don't we?
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Okay. We have 2 hours of show left and 5 minutes maybe? Okay. What I want to do is I wanted to skip over to some projections of traffic.
Sure.
I want to go to the source is the Puget Sound Regional Council. It's 17 million daily trips expected in 2040.
Right.
Divided by mode.
These are, again, computer projections. They're using models. I find these numbers, troubling in some way. Well, it's a lot of trips. I mean, 17 million daily trips.
And this is 2040, and this is after we spent all of this money on rail, and we're looking at 1%?
That's right. That's exactly right. 4 times more people on buses than on trains and 1% on rail. And it turns out that number for rail is half of what Sound Transit says it would get some years before. It's really shocking how small that number is. And this is one where I do get involved in the politics, and I've talked about this in front of elected officials, and frankly, no answer has yet been presented on that.
Let's actually go to the next slide, because this shows the dollars, what we're paying for. Yeah. And so here again, Puget Sound Regional Council, based on their numbers again, 46% of the dollars go to roads, 22% goes to Sound Transit, and that is rail.
Mostly rail. They take some money and buy some buses. It is by and large heavily rail.
How does that make any sense at all?
Well, it doesn't to me. Frankly, they will tell you, it's about peak period. It's about getting people into Seattle and Bellevue. And we're going to have rail, we're going to have light rail serving downtown Seattle. We're committed. It's going to come from Northgate, it's going to come from down south. But there are real questions. A lot of that spending is for taking the rail further out into the suburbs, north into Snohomish, out into across the lake, down south into South King County. A lot of money, not very many riders. It really isn't going to change the way people move very much.
One thing, and I've asked this before of other people, and I've never gotten, it's nearly impossible in my own mind for me to use light rail because I don't have any place to put my car. I'm not going to walk to where it is because of our weather and the hills that I have to traverse. Why is it that we don't have park and rides right next to rail stations?
Well, the design philosophy, and this relates to the same associations that are opposed to building a tunnel. The theory is we're going to build urban areas where we don't need to have cars so much. The idea of the light rail in the city of Seattle is housing and commercial development around train stations, and you pretty much don't need a car.
Are they willing to flatten all of the hills?
Well, it's frankly, the light rail is about people, is mainly for people who live within a quarter mile of the station and can walk to it. It really isn't about people like you and me who don't live near a station. They really don't think people like you and me are going to drive to a station. They don't want to let us.
And last time I checked, my knees weren't getting any younger either.
There you go.
And unfortunately, we've got to go.
It was interesting.
Thank you, John, very much. Did we solve all of the transportation problems? Actually, we didn't, so this debate rages on. Go to globaltelematics.com. You're going to find out a lot more. And we'll see you right here next week on Public Exposure. Take care.